This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andrea Fiore. 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. Preface. It is popularly supposed that a greater prosperity for individuals or nations can only come through political and social reconstruction. This cannot be true apart from the practice of the moral virtues in the individuals that comprise a nation. Better laws and social conditions will always follow a higher realization of morality among the individuals of a community, but no legal enactment can give prosperity to, nay, it cannot prevent the ruin of, a man or a nation that has become lax and decadent in the pursuit and practice of virtue. The moral virtues are the foundation and support of prosperity, as they are the soul of greatness. They endure forever, and all the works of a man which endure are built upon them. Without them there is neither strength, stability, nor substantial reality, but only ephemeral dreams. To find moral principles is to have found prosperity, greatness, truth, and is therefore to be strong, valiant, joyful, and free. James Allen. End of preface. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 1 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 1. 8 Pillars. Prosperity rests upon a moral foundation. It is popularly supposed to rest upon an immoral foundation, that is, upon trickery, sharp practice, deception, and greed. One commonly hears even an otherwise intelligent man declare that no man can be successful in business unless he is dishonest, thus regarding business prosperity, a good thing, as the effect of dishonesty, a bad thing. Such a statement is superficial and thoughtless, and reveals a total lack of knowledge of moral causation, as well as a very limited grasp of the facts of life. It is as though one should sow henbane and reap spinach, or erect a brick house on a quagmire, things impossible in the natural order of causation, and therefore not to be attempted. The spiritual or moral order of causation is not different in principle, but only in nature. The same law obtains in things unseen, in thoughts and deeds, as in things seen, in natural phenomena. Man sees the processes in natural objects, and acts with them, but not seeing the spiritual processes, he imagines that they do not obtain, and so he does not act in harmony with them. Yet these spiritual processes are just as simple and just as sure as the natural processes. They are indeed the same natural modes manifesting in the world of mind. All the parables and a large number of the sayings of the great teachers are designed to illustrate this fact. The natural world is the mental world made visible. The seen is the mirror of the unseen. The upper half of a circle is in no way different from the lower half, but its sphericity is reversed. The material and the mental are not two detached arcs in the universe. They are the two halves of a complete circle. The natural and the spiritual are not at eternal enmity, but in the true order of the universe are eternally at one. It is in the unnatural, in the abuse of function and faculty, where division arises, and where man is wrestled back, with repeated sufferings, from the perfect circle from which he has tried to depart. Every process in matter is also a process in mind. Every natural law has its spiritual counterpart. Take any natural object, and you will find its fundamental processes in the mental sphere if you rightly search. Consider, for instance, the germination of a seed and its growth into a plant, with the final development of a flower, and then back to seed again. This also is a mental process. Thoughts are seeds which, falling in the soil of the mind, germinate and develop until they reach the completed stage, blossoming into deeds good or bad, brilliant or stupid, according to their nature, and ending as seeds of thought to be again sown in other minds. A teacher is a sower of seed, a spiritual agriculturist, while he who teaches himself is the wise farmer of his own mental plot. The growth of a thought is as the growth of a plant. The seed must be sown seasonably, and time is required for its full development into the plant of knowledge and the flower of wisdom. While writing this I pause, and turn to look through my study window, and there, 100 yards away, is a tall tree, in the top of which some enterprising rook from a rookery close by has, for the first time, built its nest. A strong northeast wind is blowing, so that the top of the tree is swayed violently to and fro by the onset of the blast. Yet there is no danger to that frail thing of sticks and hair, and the mother bird, sitting upon her eggs, has no fear of the storm. Why is this? It is because the bird has instinctively built her nest in harmony with principles which ensure the maximum strength and security. First, a fork is chosen as the foundation for the nest, and not a space between two separate branches, so that, however great may be the swaying of the top tree, the position of the nest is not altered, nor its structure disturbed. Then the nest is built on a circular plan, so as to offer the greatest resistance to any external pressure, as well as to obtain more perfect compactness within, in accordance with its purpose, and so, however the tempest may rage, the birds rest in comfort and security. This is a very simple and familiar object, and yet, in the strict obedience of its structure to mathematical law, it becomes to the wise a parable of enlightenment, teaching them that only by ordering one's deeds in accordance with fixed principles is perfect surety, perfect security, and perfect peace obtained amid the uncertainty of events and the turbulent tempests of life. A house or a temple built by a man is a much more complicated structure than a bird's nest, yet it is erected in accordance with those mathematical principles which are everywhere evidenced in nature. And here is seen how man, in material things, obeys universal principles. He never attempts to put up a building in defiance of geometrical proportions, for he knows that such a building would be unsafe, and that the first storm would, in all probability, level it to the ground, if indeed it did not fall about his ears during the process of erection. Man in his material building scrupulously obeys the fixed principles of circle, square, and angle, and aided by rule, plumb line, and compasses, he raises a structure which will resist the fiercest storms, and affords him a secure shelter and safe protection. All this is very simple, the reader may say. Yes, it is simple, because it is true and perfect, so true that it cannot admit the smallest compromise, and so perfect that no man can improve upon it. Man, through long experience, has learned these principles of the material world, and sees the wisdom of obeying them, and I have thus referred to them in order to lead up to a consideration of those fixed principles in the mental or spiritual world which are just as simple and just as eternally true and perfect, yet are at present so little understood by man as he daily violates them, because he is ignorant of their nature and unconscious of the harm he is all the time inflicting upon himself. In mind as matter, in thoughts as things, in deeds as natural processes, there is a fixed foundation of law, which if consciously or ignorantly ignored leads to disaster and defeat. It is, indeed, the ignorant violation of this law, which is the cause of the world's pain and sorrow. In matter, this law is presented as mathematical. In mind, it is perceived as moral. But the mathematical and the moral are not separate and opposed. They are but two aspects of a united whole. The fixed principles of mathematics, to which all matter is subject, are the body of which the spirit is ethical, while the eternal principles of morality are mathematical truisms operating in the universe of mind. It is as impossible to live successfully apart from moral principles as to build successfully while ignoring mathematical principles. Characters, like houses, only stand firmly when built on a foundation of moral law, and they are built up slowly and laboriously, deed by deed, for in the building of character the bricks are deeds. Business and all human enterprises are not exempt from the external order, but can only stand securely by the observance of fixed laws. Prosperity, to be stable and enduring, must rest on a solid foundation of moral principle, and be supported by the adamantine pillars of sterling character and moral worth. In the attempt to run a business in defiance of moral principles, disaster of one kind or another is inevitable. The permanently prosperous men in any community are not its tricksters and deceivers, but its reliable and upright men. The Quakers are acknowledged to be the most upright men in the British community, and although their numbers are small, they are the most prosperous. The Jains in India are similar both in numbers and sterling worth, and they are the most prosperous people in India. Men speak of building up a business, and indeed a business is as much a building as is a brick house or a stone church, albeit the process of building is a mental one. Prosperity, like a house, is a roof over a man's head, affording him protection and comfort. A roof presupposes a support, and a support necessitates a foundation. The roof of prosperity, then, is supported by the following 8 pillars, which are cemented in a foundation of moral consistency: 1. Energy. 2. Economy. 3. Integrity. 4. System. 5. Sympathy. 6. Sincerity. 7. Impartiality. 8. Self-reliance. A business built up on the faultless practice of all these principles would be so firm and enduring as to be invincible. Nothing could injure it, nothing could undermine its prosperity, nothing could interrupt its success or bring it to the ground, but that success would be assured with incessant increase so long as the principles were adhered to. On the other hand, where these principles were all absent, there could be no success of any kind. There could not even be a business at all, for there would be nothing to produce the adherence of one part with another. But there would be that lack of life, that absence of fibre and consistency, which animates and gives body and form to anything whatsoever. Picture a man with all these principles absent from his mind, his daily life, and even if your knowledge of these principles is but slight and imperfect, you could not think of such a man as doing any successful work. You could picture him as leading the confused life of a shiftless tramp, but to imagine him as the head of a business, as the center of an organization, or as a responsible and controlling agent in any department of life, this you could not do, because you realize its impossibility. The fact that no one of moderate morality and intelligence can think of such a man as commanding any success, should, to all those who have not yet grasped the import of these principles, and therefore declare that morality is not a factor, but rather a hindrance in prosperity, be a sound proof to them that their conclusion is totally wrong, for if it was right, then the greater the lack of these moral principles, the greater would be the success. These 8 principles, then, in greater or lesser degree, are the causative factors in all success of whatsoever kind. Underneath all prosperity they are the strong supports, and howsoever appearances may be against such a conclusion, a measure of them informs and sustains every effort which is crowned with that excellence which men name success. It is true that comparatively few successful men practice, in their entirety and perfection, 8 principles, but there are those who do, and they are the leaders, teachers, and guides of men, the supports of human society, and the strong pioneers of human evolution. But while few achieve that moral perfection which ensures the acme of success, all lesser successes come from the partial observance of these principles, which are so powerful in the production of good results that even perfection in any 2 or 3 of them alone is sufficient to ensure an ordinary degree of prosperity, and maintain a measure of local influence, at least for a time, while the same perfection in 2 or 3, with partial excellence in all or nearly all the others, will render permanent that limited success and influence which will necessarily grow and extend in exact ratio with a more intimate knowledge and practice of those principles which at present are only partially incorporated in the character. The boundary lines of a man's morality mark the limits of his success. So true is this that to know a man's moral status would be to mathematically gauge, his ultimate success or failure. The temple of prosperity only stands in so far as it is supported by its moral pillars, and as they are weakened, it becomes insecure in so far as they are withdrawn. It crumbles away and totters to ruin. Ultimate failure and defeat are inevitable where moral principles are ignored or defied, inevitable in the nature of things as cause and effect. As a stone thrown upward returns to the earth, so every deed, good or bad, returns upon him that set it forth. Every unmoral or immoral act frustrates the end at which it aims, and every such succeeding act puts it further and further away as an achievement. On the other hand, every moral act is another solid brick in the temple of prosperity, another round of strength and sculptured beauty in the pillars which support it. Individuals, families, nations grow and prosper in harmony with their growth in moral strength and knowledge. They fall and fail in accordance with their moral decadence. Mentally, as physically, only that which has form and solidity can stand and endure. The unmoral is nothingness, and from it nothing can be formed. It is the negation of substance. The immoral is destruction. It is the negation of form. It is a process of spiritual denudation. While it undermines and disintegrates, it leaves the scattered material ready for the wise builder to put it into form again, and the wise builder is morality. The moral substance, form, and building power in one. Morality always builds up and preserves, for that is its nature, being the opposite of immorality, which always breaks down and destroys. Morality is the master builder everywhere, whether in individuals or nations. Morality is invincible, and he who stands upon it to the end stands upon an impregnable rock, so that his defeat is impossible, his triumph is certain. He will be tried, and that to the uttermost, for without fighting there can be no victory, and so only can his moral powers be perfected, and it is in the nature of fixed principles, as of everything finely and perfectly wrought, to have their strength tested and proved. The steel bars, which are to perform the strongest and best uses in the world, must be subjected to a severe strain by the iron master, as a test of their texture and efficiency before they are sent from his foundry. The
For without
brickmaker
fighting
throws
there can
aside
be
the
no
bricks which
victory,
have given way
and so
under the
only can his
severe
moral
heat.
powers be perfected.
So he who is to be
And it
greatly
is
and
in the
permanently
nature of fixed
successful
principles,
will pass
as
through
of
the strain
everything
of
finely
adverse
and perfectly wrought,
circumstances and the fire
to
of
have their
temptation,
strength tested
with
and
his moral
proved,
nature not
the
merely
steel bars,
undermined,
which are
but
to perform the
strengthened and
strongest and
beautified.
best uses in the
He
world,
will be like a
must
bar
be
of well-wrought
subjected to a
steel,
severe strain by
fit
the
for the
iron
highest
master,
use,
as a
and the
test of their
universe will
texture and
see, as the
efficiency,
iron master
before they
his
are sent
finely
from
wrought
his
steel,
foundry.
that the
The
use does not
without
escape
fighting there
him.
can be no
Bricks which
victory.
have given way,
And so
is
only can his
assailable at
moral
every
powers be
point.
perfected.
So he who is to be
tries
great
to
and
stand
stand upon it
successful
sinks into
will
the
pass
morass
through
of
the
strain
strain
of
of finely
adverse
and perfectly wrought,
circumstances, even
and the
while
fire
his
to have their
applications
strength
stand,
tested
with his
and
moral
proved,
nature
not
crumbling
mere
away
steel bars, which
the
are to
climax
perform
of
the
failure is
strongest and best
inevitable.
uses in the world.
While the
Will be like
immoral
a
man
bar
is
subjected
chuckling
to
over
a
his
severe
ill-gotten
strain by
gains,
the
for the
iron
highest there is
masters,
already a
as a
hole in
test
his
of
pocket through which his gold is falling. While he who begins with morality, yet deserts it for gain in the hour of trial, is like the brick which breaks on the first application of heat. He is not fit for use, and the universe casts him aside, yet not finally, for he is a being and not a brick, and he can live and learn, can repent and be restored. Moral force is the life of all successes, and the sustaining element in all prosperity. But there are various kinds of successes, and it is frequently necessary that a man should fail in one direction that he may reach up to a greater and more far-reaching success. If, for instance, a literary, artistic, or spiritual genius should begin by trying to make money, it may be, and often is, advantage and the betterment of his genius that he should fail therein, so that he may achieve that more sublime success wherein lies his real power. Many a millionaire would doubtless be willing to barter his millions for the literary success of a Shakespeare or the spiritual success of a Buddha, and would thereby consider that he had made a good bargain. Exceptional spiritual success is rarely accompanied with riches, yet financial success cannot in any way compare with it in greatness and grandeur. But I am not, in this book, dealing with the success of the saint or spiritual genius, but with that success which concerns the welfare, well-being, and happiness of the broadly average man and woman, in a word, with the prosperity which, while being more or less connected with money, being present and temporal, yet is not confined thereto, but extends to and embraces all human activities, and which particularly relates to that harmony of the individual with his circumstances which produces that satisfaction called happiness and that comfort known as prosperity. To the achievement of this end, so desirable to the mass of mankind, let us now see how the 8 principles operate, how the roof of prosperity is raised and made secure upon the pillars by which it is supported. Chapter 1. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 2 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 2. First Pillar. Energy. Energy is the working power in all achievement. Inert coal converts it into fire, and water transmutes it into steam. It vivifies and intensifies the commonest talent until it approaches to genius, and when it touches the mind of the dullard, it turns into a living fire that which before was sleeping in inertia. Energy is a moral virtue, its opposing vice being laziness. As a virtue, it can be cultivated, and the lazy man can become energetic by forcibly arousing himself to exertion. Compared with the energetic man, the lazy man is half alive. Even while the latter is talking about the difficulty of doing a thing, The former is doing it. The active man has done a considerable amount of work before the lazy man has roused himself from sleep. While the lazy man is waiting for an opportunity, the active man has gone out, and met, and utilized half a dozen opportunities. He does things while the other is rubbing his eyes. Energy is one of the primary forces. Without it nothing can be accomplished. It is the basic element in all forms of action. The entire universe is a manifestation of tireless, though inscrutable, energy. Energy is, indeed, life, and without it there would be no universe, no life. When a man has ceased to act, when the body lies inert, and all the functions have ceased to act, then we say he is dead, and in so far as a man fails to act, he is so far dead. Man, physically and mentally, is framed for action, and not for swinish ease. Every muscle of the body, being a lever for exertion, is a rebuke to the lazy man. Every bone and nerve is fashioned for resistance. Every function and faculty is there for a legitimate use. All things have their end in action. All things are perfected in use. This being so, there is no prosperity for the lazy man, no happiness, no refuge and no rest. For him there is not even the ease which he covets, for he at last becomes a homeless outcast, a troubled, harried, despised man, so that the proverb wisely puts it, "The lazy man does the hardest work," in that, avoiding the systematic labor of skill, he brings upon himself the hardest lot. Yet energy misapplied is better than no energy at all. This is powerfully put by St. John in the words, "I would have you either hot or cold. If you are lukewarm, I will spew you out of my mouth." The extremes of heat and cold here symbolize the transforming agency of energy, in its good and bad aspects. The lukewarm stage is colorless, lifeless, useless. It can scarcely be said to have either virtue or vice, and is merely barren, empty, fruitless. The man who applies his abounding energy to bad ends has, at the very power with which he strives to acquire his selfish ends, will bring upon him such difficulties, pains, and sorrows that will compel him to learn by experience, and so at last to refashion his base of action. At the right moment he will turn round and cut new and proper channels for the outflow of his power, and he will then be just as strong and good as he was formerly in evil. The truth is beautifully crystallized in the old proverb, "The greater the sinner, the greater the saint." Energy is power, and without it there will be no accomplishment. There will not even be virtue, for virtue does not consist of not doing evil, but also, primarily, of doing good. There are those who try, yet fail through insufficient energy. Their efforts are too feeble to produce positive results. Such are not vicious, and because they never do any deliberate harm, are usually spoken of as good men that fail. But to lack the initiative to do harm is not to be good, it is only to be weak and powerless. He who is truly a good man, having the power to do evil, yet chooses to direct his energies in ways that are good. Without a considerable degree of energy, therefore, there will be no moral power. What good there is will be latent and sleeping. There will be no going forth of good, just as there can be no mechanical motion without the motive power. Energy is the informing power in all doing in every department of life, whether it be along material or spiritual lines. The call to action, which comes not only from the soldier, but from the lips or pen of every teacher in every grade of thought, is a call to men to rouse their sleeping energy, and to do vigorously the task in hand. Even the men of contemplation and meditation never cease to rouse their disciples to exertion in meditative thought. Energy is alike needed in all spheres of life. and not only are the rules of the soldier, the engineer, and the merchant rules of action, but nearly all precepts of the saviors, sages, and saints are precepts of doing. The advice of one of the great teachers to his disciples, "Keep wide awake," tersely expresses the necessity for tireless energy if one's purpose is to be accomplished, and is equally good advice to the salesman as to the saint. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and liberty is the reaching of one's fixed end. It was the same teacher that said, "If anything is to be done, let a man do it at once, let him attack it vigorously." The wisdom of this advice is seen when it is remembered that action is creative, that increase and development follow upon legitimate use. To get more energy, we must use to the full that which we already possess. Only to him that is given, only to him that puts his hand vigorously to some task, does power and freedom come. But energy, to be productive, must not only be directed towards good ends, it must be carefully controlled and conserved. The conservation of energy is a modern term expressive of that principle in nature by which no energy is wasted or lost, and the man whose energies are to be fruitful in results must work intelligently upon this principle. Noise and hurry are so much energy running to waste. More haste, less speed. The maximum of noise usually accompanies the minimum of accomplishment. With much talk there is little doing. Working steam is not heard. It is the escaping steam which makes a great noise. It is the concentrated powder which drives the bullet to its mark. In so far as a man intensifies his energies by conserving them and concentrating them upon the accomplishment of his purpose, just so far does he gain quietness and silence, in repose and calmness. It is a great delusion that noise means power. There is no great baby than the blustering boaster. He is but an infant mentally, and having no strength to do anything, and no work to show, he tries to make up for it by loudly proclaiming what he has done, or could do. Still waters run deep, and the great universal forces are inaudible. Where calmness is, there is the greatest power. Calmness is the sure indication of a strong, well-trained, patiently disciplined mind. The calm man knows his business, be sure of it. His words are few, but they tell. His schemes are well planned, and they work true, like a well-balanced machine. He sees a long way ahead, and makes straight for his object. The enemy, difficulty, he converts into a friend, and makes profitable use of him, for he has studied well how to agree with his adversary while he is in the way with him. Like a wise general, he has anticipated all emergencies. Indeed, he is the man who is prepared beforehand. In his meditations, in the counsels of his judgment, he has conferred with causes, and has caught the bent of all contingencies. He is never taken by surprise, is never in a hurry, is safe in the keeping of his own steadfastness, and is sure of his ground. You may think you have got him, only to find, the next moment, that you have tripped in your haste, and that he has got you, or rather that you, wanting calmness, have hurried yourself into the dilemma which you have prepared for him. Your impulse cannot do battle with his deliberation, but is foiled by the first attack. Your uncurbed energy cannot turn aside the wisely directed steam of his concentrated power. He is armed at all points. By a mental jiu-jitsu acquired through self-discipline, he meets opposition in such a way that it destroys itself. Upbraid him with angry words, and the reproof hidden in his gentle reply searches to the very heart of your folly, and the fire of your anger sinks into the ashes of remorse. Approach him with a vulgar familiarity, and his look at once will fill you with shame, and brings you back to your senses. As he is prepared for all events, so is he ready for all men, though no men are ready for him. All weaknesses are betrayed in his presence, and he commands by an inherent force which calmness has rendered habitual and unconscious. Calmness, as distinguished from the dead placidity of languor, is the acme of concentrated energy. There is a focused mentality behind it. In agitation and excitement the mentality is dispersed. It is irresponsible, and is without force or weight. The fussy, peevish, irritable man has no influence. He repels and not attracts. He wonders why his easy-going neighbor succeeds and is sought after, while he, who is always hurrying, worrying, and troubling the miscalls, is striving, falls, and is avoided. His neighbor, being a calmer man, is not more easy-going, but more deliberate, gets through more work, does it more skillfully, and is more self-possessed and manly. This is the reason of his success and influence. His energy is controlled and used, while the other man's energy is dispersed and abused. Energy, then, is the first pillar in the temple of prosperity, and without it, as the first and most essential equipment, there can be no prosperity. No energy means no capacity. There is no manly self-respect and independence. Amongst the unemployed there will be found many who are unemployable through sheer lack of this first essential work of energy. The man that stands many hours a day at a street corner with his hands in his pockets and a pipe in his mouth, waiting for someone to treat him to a glass of beer, is little likely to find employment, or to accept it should it come to him. Physically flabby and mentally inert, he is every day becoming more some.